After declaring a caliphate in areas of Syria and Iraq, U.S. officials say ISIS militants are beefing up their military capabilities with advanced bomb-making skills and cultivating a new wave of suicide bombers. The threat to American interests is, quote, extremely high, and as a result, the U.S. is sending more troops to Baghdad to protect our embassy. Former CIA and NSA Director General Michael Hayden offers a chilling warning about the future of Iraq and how that could affect Americans on our own soil.
You said this week that Iraq as we know it has ceased to exist. What do you mean by that, General?
Well, first of all, Chris, I think I'm right, and I hope I'm wrong. I certainly wish my mind wasn't leading this progression of thoughts, but we are seeing the creation of another ungoverned area, and unlike Afghanistan, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere, as you already suggested, this is in the middle of the Middle East. This is quite a dangerous thing that we're seeing unfold here. It's probably not 9/11, but it's certainly in the same area code.
Greg, let me start with you. When President Obama said that we're going to end the war in Iraq and try to we'll just contain terrorism there without a political solution left behind, and then in Syria does a similar thing, and now those borders are erased, and we have a situation that General Hayden, who is not a political guy, right? His job has always been he's now not in the government, but his career was in the military and then the CIA. What's frustrating is that Republicans are then asked a question of, well, then what would you do?
Right.
But they weren't advocating the president's foreign policy to begin with. So where is the demonstration that our government is actually going to do something to either prove to us that they can contain it or to do something to take it out?
That's a good question, because I don't know what they're doing. I mean, it really isn't our problem until it becomes our problem. And I often ask myself, could 9/11 have been prevented? We knew the Islamic threat, but we didn't act. That's a lesson here. It's all about keeping a presence, airstrikes, drones, doing what you can, but it really is about a presence. Saying no boots on the ground is not a stance. We had boots on the ground for 7 decades, and we remained safe when we won the Cold War. And if you don't see the link between that, congrats, you'll get tenure at any major campus.
Well, Michael Hayden wasn't the only person that spoke out this week. Andrea, this is something I think the Obama administration has kind of gotten a pass on, and it might be something that taxpayers, just regardless of your party affiliation, want to look at, and that is the failure of intelligence to predict this threat. So General Petraeus, who is no longer in the government but still involved in the world, says he could have seen this coming, that the administration was warned. There was testimony in front of Congress trying to raise a red flag to say we actually think that ISIS is gaining in strength. Do you think that the intelligence failure is something here that the media hasn't focused on enough?
I do. I think that there was plenty of heads-up given to President Obama if he were to read his intelligence briefings. There were warnings that this country could fall. Every time that he talked about troop withdrawal and drawing down the war, there were people that were against it that would speak up and say Iraq will fall. Again, I don't think the president cares. If he were a very strong president, if I were him, I would stand up and I would say, look, this is an area deeply rooted with ethnic hatreds. It is not our issue yet. If ISIS begins to march on Baghdad, it will be a full-blown civil war. It will be a huge problem, and that is not our problem yet. If I were President Obama, I would continue with that statement by saying, if ISIS or any other entities in the Middle East begin to target the United States of America, then it becomes our problem, and we will wipe you out. We will return, we will wipe you out, and we will leave. No democracy promotion. We will flatten you. Period. End of story. Again, I would wait a little bit on this one just because I don't see what coherence airstrikes would do. ISIS is deeply entrenched in that population. They've infiltrated it. They've wrapped their arms around it. Without any presence on the ground, I'm not exactly sure what it would do. And again, it's going to turn into a bloody civil war, and I don't think we want to be a part of that. And I certainly don't want our troops, if caught, to be beheaded and killed for their civil war.
Good points. Okay, Bob, the president has been very emphatic, no boots on the ground. However, today we hear of a few more troops going in to protect and a few more. I mean, are they basically just trying to inch their way up? They're not going to send 100,000 troops. But at what point do the Democrats even start to say to the president, you know, I think you're going too far here?
Well, I think not much further than what he's going now, and he's going to start getting some heat. Let's keep something in mind here. Historically, this has been a religious conflict between the Kurds, the Sunnis, and the Shiites well before the British drew the lines that said this is Iraq. They sat down, there's some civil servant in Britain said, here's Iraq. And frankly, I hate to say this, but I'm sort of missing the bad old days of Saddam Hussein. Only a strong dictator can keep these religious fanatics from each other's throats. The idea that America can go in the middle of this place and solve it is just crazy.
But you can't tell the Kurds that. The Kurds are doing way better. The Kurds actually have a fairly peaceful existence. They're glad to.
Well, that's right.
Ask them. Can I get Eric in here before we have to go? From President Obama's standpoint, in some ways I feel like we've talked about this for 6 years. He's been so much time fighting President Bush that now he's back to almost in a position where he's going to have to take some radical action to have a course correction in order to fulfill his oath to protect the country.
And okay, I'm not. Here's what I wouldn't do. All right, I certainly wouldn't be sending any more troops, other than you need to protect our embassy in Baghdad. I think that's the first and foremost, and I think that's what he's doing. Also, what I would do is I would beef up whatever we need to do with Israel. Make sure Israel's strong, and if ISIS has any inclination on going anywhere near Israel, that would be the cause for a lot of things, including boots on the ground. And I certainly would stop this idea of sending $500 million in aid to the rebels in Syria, because we just don't know who we're arming. In fact, sometimes we're aiding Syrian rebels, and they end up being the same people that we're fighting in Iraq.
How crazy is that? No, right. That's a great point, Eric. John McCain, a Republican, see, this is where Republicans and Democrats have both gotten this issue wrong. Just a couple months ago, John McCain was calling to arm essentially ISIS, and he said, "Oh well, it's going to be the moderates." Good luck with that.
Who really?
Well, I think even going back 2 years is when that original request to try to push it forward.
But your assumption is the United States military could beat these guys if they were on the ground. I don't believe that.
We could beat these guys.
I don't believe for a second.
We could beat them.
Absolutely.
They could bleed us. They could bleed us out for another 2 decades.
We could destroy them.
How?
Quickly. If
really?
we really made this
big bombs?
argument, oh yeah,
we've done it before.
We would annihilate them.
We've done it before.
Yeah,
that's the sad part is we have done it before. We actually won the war. President Obama wasn't interested in winning.
Won the war?
Yes, we won the Iraq war, and he was interested in ending it rather than winning it, which is why it's falling apart.
If you think that was a won war, then you believe
the war was won, and if we had kept the
Disneyland
presence there, it would have stayed that way.
Can I make one quick thought to ISIS? Everyone's really freaking out about ISIS because they've declared this caliphate. It didn't matter what borders there was going to be. The caliphate being an Islamic state that is recognized by its own size, not by anyone else's borders. But don't forget, they have a lot of enemies right now. The U.S. is their enemy. The Iraqis are their enemy. The Iranians are their enemy.
Saudis
and the Saudis are their enemy. Let these people kill each other.
Well, perhaps it is a lot of
daylights out of each other.
Perhaps it's a lot of chest thumping, but I don't know how we protect ourselves if they're actually serious. So I'd rather err on the side of caution. I just don't know what that is actually supposed to be. Okay, directly ahead, stunning.